Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Modern Open in Syracuse, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller, by our current player of the year in the race, Jeff Hoogland. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Nick.
When it's Modern, we think of Jeff and we think of Kiki Cord.
Yep.
But your pet deck is changing names now.
It's evolving.
Because we have this little card from Eldritch Moon called Eldritch Evolution. And you've already kind of changed your Kiki Cord deck that you've been playing.
Yep.
And have a top 8 finish in the Classic 2 weeks ago in Baltimore.
Yep.
Now the deck is continuing to change. Quarter Calling's only a 2 of now.
Yeah, so actually the Baltimore Classic was literally the first games I'd ever played with Eldritch Evolution. We hadn't really started testing Modern yet. I was just like, well, Standard didn't go as planned, so like let's just jam all these cards I wanted to try. And Eldritch Evolution is really powerful. I won my second match in that tournament, and I walked over to the booth and I was like, can I buy 4 of these? Because I was borrowing them, and I was like, this card's very powerful.
Right. You have it now, so you've changed the deck a little bit, because you're not so much a Quarter Calling deck anymore, as you are kind of looking to play this super value plan that happens to have a combo kill.
Yeah, and one of the things that really separates Kiki Cord from like the ANFN's company decks is that you're a value mid-range deck first, and you sometimes you oops, kill them, but even like Kiki Jiki's a value card with like Voice of Resurgence and Eternal Witness and all these other things that we're doing. Right.
So we've got a full 4 of Voice Resurgence and the Wall of Omens, which are just premier targets for the Eldritch Evolution.
Yeah, one of the big things we're doing with this deck is we're not accelerating into a 3-drop on turn 2, which is why you don't see like 7 or 8 mana creatures. We only play just 5 of them, because we're looking to just naturally curve 2-drop into Evolution for a powerful 4. Having Voice of Resurgence into PN Krindler on curve that 2-3 puts 8 power on the table on your 3rd turn, which is really enough to race most things in this format.
Right, that seems like a very powerful interaction. Of course, the Wall of Omens replaces itself when you get rid of it.
Yep.
And one thing you've kind of mentioned in articles, but you'd kind of expect to see a card like Kitchen Finks in this deck. No, you don't have any copies.
Yeah, so one of the big things that I think a lot of people miss when they're building this deck specifically with Eldritch Evolution is that because we're not rushing to get to a combo, a lot of the times I hear people talk about Kitchen Finks like, well, you Eldritch Evolution it the first time and you get Resto and you blink it, and then you Eldritch Evolution it the second time and you get Kiki and you combo them. And it's like, well, if you had 2 Eldritch Evolutions, you were probably winning the game anyways, so you just got to upgrade anything else that you had in play. And rushing to the combo like that isn't good if they have any sort of removal. So it's something you wouldn't even want to be doing even if you have that line available to you.
Right. Now, 2 weeks ago in Baltimore, you were playing some Haymakers, cards like Elishnorn and things like that.
Yep.
The super big cards are no longer in the deck.
I mean, Murkthar's a pretty big boy.
We don't have any 7 drops or above.
Correct, yeah, and Elishnorn was just like I said, I just tried everything in Baltimore that I was on my radar that I wanted to try, and well, Elishnorn won me games. It also lost me games because I was looking at the 7 drop in my hand like, you're a big girl.
Yeah, we can't do anything with that. All right, so we've got a bunch of 1-ups going on in this deck. Take us through some of the new ones. I think Anna Finns are the foremost deserves some talking points here because Dredge is everywhere today.
Yeah, so Anna Finns is actually the reason I'm playing black. In Baltimore, I played just a straight Naya configuration deck, and I was really happy with that. But I actually lost to the Dredge deck that won the tournament in the top 4, and Scavenging Ooze is just not enough in that matchup. They're so fast, and they have so many things that you need to exile every single turn that, especially without Wall of Roots in this deck, Scavenging Ooze just can't keep them in check. Right. So Anna Finns is fantastic, not only because it's a hate card in that matchup, but it's also good against other popular decks in the format like Abzan Company and Living End. And on top of all that, it's just a 4/4 that attacks for 5.
Yeah.
It closes games very quickly. So even when her other line of text isn't relevant, she just beats them down.
Right. Back on Birthing Pod's last days in the format back in the day, Brian Broaddoin was using a bunch of Anna Finns just because the 4/4 on turn 2 is usually good enough to race most people.
Correct. Yep.
Doesn't die to bolt, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Now having the exile effect is also just massively important.
Yeah, I played Burn this past round, and I played it on turn 3, and my opponent picked it up. Right? He was like, oh, yep.
None of your cats or goblins are going to get through that creature.
Yep.
All right, so of course we got Obstinate Bailoff going along the burn plan. Spell Sky kind of works there too. Go ahead and mention some of your favorite 1-ofs and kind of why they're in the deck this week.
So Selfless Spirit is a card that I think is very powerful in Modern in general. I think a lot of people are looking at it through the lens of, oh, you cord for it in response to a sweeper and like counter the sweeper. But the card does so much more than that. In addition to just being like reasonable pressure on turn 2 because of its evasive body, it also just makes combat miserable for your opponents. Like much in the same way people like get blown out by a Tarka's command when they go to blocks, like this Selfless Spirit just means they could never make good attacks into your board because you just got this one card that says, well, all my guys live this turn.
Right. Rurik Thar, you mentioned that as kind of your top end here.
Yeah, Rurik Thar is the type of card, and a lot of people look at the card and they look at this, they're like, well, this is too slow in the matchups where you want it. And the thing about Rurik Thar is you're not planning to win these matchups by just getting to a 6-drop. You're planning on winning these matchups by playing cards like Eidolon of Rhetoric and these other cards that like interact with your opponent while you're working your way up to the Rurik Thar. And then when you get to the Rurik Thar, that's it. The game is over. They can't get out from underneath it.
Right. Of course, you got Path to Exile in your main deck as well to kind of slow down the decks you're looking to do that with.
Yeah, and we have, because we're splashing black for Anafenza, we have Orzhov Pontiff in the main deck as well, very good at slowing down Infect and Affinity and stuff like that.
Right, like depending on the current meta, I feel like you switch from blue to black in like your splash for this deck based on what you want to be.
Correct, yeah, which tools you want. Is Glenelendra better this week? Is Anafenza better this week? Is Pontiff better than Static Caster? Like those are the types of decisions you have to be making as you're playing the core deck. And it's definitely the deck where like if you're playing this in like an IQ or your FNM or something like that, you want to be changing these 10 cards that I have that are one-ofs in the main deck based on the decks you expect to play at your small tournament.
Right. Of course, you got Solid Pride Mage, Scavenging Ooze, Revel Arc, rounding out the rest of them, of course, with Kiki Jiki, which allows your win with Restoration Angel.
Yep.
All right. You got how many Eternal Witnesses?
We have 2 copies of Eternal Witness. Again, we just don't have a ton of 5s that we're really looking to evolve into a lot of the time, so we're not very heavy in the 3-drop slot.
Right. A key thing to notice here is a lot of the 2s are turning into your 4s.
Yep.
Very few 5s.
And in previous iterations of the deck, I often played Lone Missionary in the 75 somewhere to cord 4 quickly to hedge the burn matchup. Because Eldritch Evolution lets you get Baloth on turn 3, you just don't have to play a weak card like Lone Missionary anymore. You have this gain 4 on a 4/4, so the body's reasonable as well.
Right. All right, so that pretty much sums up the main deck. The sideboard, you have a slew of more one-ofs, which you kind of look at and you can kind of figure out where they're going, but you have some more, a reasonable sideboard,
correct,
as you would call it, with 3 Engineered Explosives as the highlight, I think.
Yeah, Engineered Explosives is just an incredibly flexible card in Modern in general. We've seen a lot of sideboards. One of the reasons why it's exceptional in this deck is because Dredge is popular, Grafdigger's Cage is seeing more play, which shuts down our Court of Callings and our Eldritch Evolution. The great thing about Engineered Explosives is that you can bring it in against decks you expect to have Grafdigger's Cage, and when they don't have it or they just don't draw it, it's not a dead draw. It's not like a Reclamation Sage, it's a 2-1, or a Bosley Primate, which is kind of embarrassing, like this kills their Tarmogoyf, or it takes off their Liliana that's going to ultimate, or something like that.
Right, that's one thing to definitely note is the amount of kind of splash damage you're going to take from these Dredge decks gaining in popularity.
Yep.
The Abzan Coco deck, of course, suffered that with, Grafdigger's Cage as well.
Yep.
Fulminator Mage and Lightning Helix you have multiples of as well.
Yeah, so Fulminator Mage is there for your big mana matchups, Tron and Scapeshift. The Scapeshift matchup has always been kind of rough for this deck, and Eldritch Revolution doesn't really improve that by a whole lot. The Tron matchup actually got quite a bit better, though, because they're one of the decks that you do want a fast combo against, and Eldritch Revolution enables that to happen more often. Lightning Helix is just great because against a number of decks in the format that are a little bit faster than you board into kind of what I always call a bad Jund deck. You've got like the 4th pass, a couple extra Helixes, and you just like play this 1-for-1 removal game while you play these threats that eventually kill them.
Right, so we've seen Eldritch Evolution pop into the format. Well, we've only had 1 weekend of results with it, really. You had a nice finisher with it. Eli Cassis is playing with it in his Bant Retreat deck this weekend. Where do you see this card going? And, where are all the crazy Allosaurus Riders decks and all these things?
In all honesty, with Standard just changing up, I haven't had enough time to really test and tune those decks. This was the first most natural slot for me to play it in, and I've done some testing with Elves and Allosaurus Riders. I think that's a really great shell for that, and that's promising. I think there's definitely a new Eldritch Evolution deck in this format somewhere that wasn't playing Court or Company before, I think.
All right, well, hopefully you'll find it and be in the sideboard to take us through the ropes of that deck too. Jeff, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Syracuse.